When the great King Vurak of the Karth Dominion died, the whole galaxy stopped to watch. He had ruled longer than most civilizations remembered. His voice had once silenced armies, and his command had shaped alliances that reached from the ice moons of Varos to the burning dunes of T-Rex. Yet when the old monarch's body was carried into the royal vault, the court's sadness quickly turned into hunger for power. Every noble family wanted a piece of the throne. The Galactic Council assembled on the shining world of Karthar, their marble hall filled with alien nobles, whose jeweled robes shimmered under crystal light. They came not to mourn, but to learn who would inherit the throne, who would own the Dominion's fleets, and who would control the endless trade routes the old king had built. The air was heavy with pride and whispers. Everyone expected that one of the high-born sons would take command, or that the council itself would claim guardianship until an agreement could be reached. When the executor of the royal will entered, silence fell. He was a thin old creature with silver scales and calm eyes. He unrolled a glowing scroll that carried the king's last command. In his tired voice he began to read. The first lines were expected gifts to the council, blessings to the people. But then a line came that froze every heart in the room. The king had named a human. The executor repeated the words twice because the room could not believe it. Captain Elias Rain of the Terran forces, the will said, is to receive guardianship and lawful protection of my daughter, Princess Lurea Vurak. The hall erupted. Laughter, outrage, disbelief. Some nobles shouted that it was a mistake. Others called it madness. Humans were seen as primitive, short-lived, soft-skinned creatures from the edge of the stars. How could one be trusted with royal blood? High Lord Seral, whose family had hoped to marry into the throne, stood and mocked, so the mighty Vurak leaves his only child to a savage who still burns oil for fire. What humor the dead king possessed. No one saw the faint tremor that passed through the executor's hands as he continued to read. The king's words were clear. The human was chosen because he had once saved the king's life during the Battle of Hadar Gate. The king had sworn that one day he would repay that debt not with gold or land, but with something of true value. He wrote that only a man with a human heart could keep his daughter safe in the storms that were coming. Still, the council laughed. The princess sat in silence beside the throne, her head lowered. Many refused to look at her directly. Her people called her the stone-skinned one. Her flesh shimmered faintly like silver granite, hard and rough under light. Her eyes were deep violet, too strange, too unreadable. To many of her race, she was considered a flaw, a reminder of an older genetic line they wanted to forget. Rumors said even her father had kept her hidden from the public eye for years. Now she sat alone, shoulders straight but face empty, while strangers mocked her father's last act. Far away, on the outer human colony of Epsilon 9, Captain Elias Rain was living quietly. He had fought in wars no one remembered and carried scars across his back from plasma burns that never healed right. He worked as an engineer, fixing cargo haulers and teaching young recruits how to survive in vacuum suits. The message from the Galactic Council arrived in the middle of a dust storm. He read it twice before believing. The seal of the Karth Dominion was unmistakable. It ordered his immediate travel to the capital world to fulfill the terms of King Vurak's will. He laughed softly, thinking it was some bureaucratic error. Then a hologram of the executor appeared, formal and cold, confirming that the king's words were law. Elias packed a small bag, put on his old service uniform, and boarded a civilian shuttle toward the inner systems. He felt uneasy all the way. Why him? What could an alien princess possibly need from a man who barely had credits to repair his boots? When he arrived at Karthar, the capital planet overwhelmed him. Towers of living glass pierced the clouds, and rivers of light flowed between them like veins of a massive creature. Security drones scanned every heartbeat. At the spaceport, reporters and officials waited. Most had come to see the strange human who would claim the king's final joke. Elias walked past flashing cameras, his face calm, but his stomach tight. Soldiers escorted him to the royal palace, a mountain of crystal domes and metallic bridges that gleamed under the twin suns. Inside, the council waited, arranged in a half-circle of golden chairs. Every alien face studied him with open contempt. The executor stepped forward and spoke the formal words, declaring the inheritance completed. Elias bowed slightly, unsure how to behave. When he raised his head, he saw her. Princess Lurea stood near a tall window. The light from outside hit her face in pale silver reflections. Her eyes were dark, almost violet black, watching him without emotion. She did not look weak or broken, only quiet, like someone who had long stopped expecting kindness. Elias saluted her out of habit. The room filled with laughter again. A noble hissed. He salutes her like a soldier to a commander. Does he think this is a battlefield? But the princess tilted her head slightly, and for a brief moment, her lips curved in something close to surprise. No one had saluted her before. The council leader spoke with a sneer. Human, your king left you a burden. She is your responsibility now. You may do as you wish, but remember, you are not of noble blood. You will receive no help, no land, no fleet. You have inherited only what no one else desired. Elias felt the insult but said nothing. He simply replied, Then I will do what the king asked. I'll protect her. Those words echoed through the hall like thunder. The council mocked him again, but something inside Lurea's chest stirred. A faint spark she thought long dead. They gave him quarters inside the old East Wing, far from the noble suites. The walls there were cracked, the floors dusty, and the guards rarely passed through. Luria lived 2 halls away, attended only by silent service drones. Every night Elias could hear the distant sound of her playing a soft instrument, the melody filled with loneliness. Days turned into weeks. The council tried to ignore him, believing he would soon leave. Instead, he began to repair things around the wing, broken lights, leaking vents, malfunctioning doors. He worked with his own hands, not commanding anyone. The alien servants watched in shock. Humans were not supposed to touch royal property. One evening, while fixing a power conduit near the garden, Elias saw Lurea standing among the crystal flowers. She looked up at the artificial stars above the dome. Without turning, she spoke, her voice low and even. You don't belong here. Elias wiped his hands on his sleeve. Neither do you, from what I see. She turned then, her violet eyes narrowing. For a moment, he thought she might have him thrown out. Instead, she studied him quietly. Why did you accept it? She asked. The council laughs at you. The people think you're a servant. He shrugged. Because your father asked me to. He once saved my crew, said I reminded him of a promise. Maybe this is how I pay it back. Lurea looked away again. They call me the ugly daughter, she said softly. They think the king's mind was gone when he named you. Maybe they are right. Elias stepped closer, careful not to frighten her. I've seen ugliness, he said. It doesn't look like you. She froze, uncertain how to respond. No one had ever spoken to her that way, not as a subject or a symbol, but as a person. That night, when he returned to his room, he found a tray of food waiting for him. Alien dishes, but arranged carefully. A note lay beside it, written in formal script, for the human guardian. From the princess. He smiled quietly and ate under the faint hum of the palace lights. Outside, the Galactic Council met again, already planning how to undo the will. They saw the human as a danger, a piece of chaos that did not belong in their perfect order. But in the silent East Wing, among the dust and broken walls, 2 lonely souls had begun to speak again. The galaxy laughed, but soon it would learn that King Vurok's will had never been a joke. It was a warning, and a test of who still had the courage to see worth where others saw shame. Elias slept that night dreaming of battlefields and quiet eyes of violet stone. Far away in her chamber, Lurea watched the same twin moons rise and whispered to herself that maybe, for once, her father had not been wrong. Days passed slowly in the silent eastern wing of the royal palace. The laughter of the nobles had faded into whispers, but the echo of their mockery still lingered in the air. Elias Rain tried to ignore it. He woke early each day, fixed things that were broken, and learned the layout of the palace's vast halls. He did not know what his exact duty was except to protect the princess, yet he treated it like a mission. That was what he understood best, following orders, keeping someone safe even if no one respected the task. Princess Lurea rarely spoke to him. She would appear quietly, wrapped in long silver robes, her expression calm and distant. Sometimes she would stand at the balcony, looking down at the city lights like she was counting every spark. Elias often wondered what she was thinking, but he never asked. She had a wall around her, invisible but strong. One afternoon he found her alone in the garden again. The crystal flowers were blooming in pale blue light, and the air smelled faintly of metal. She was sitting near the fountain, running her fingers across the water, watching the ripples. Elias stood a few feet away and said, "The garden lights were almost gone." I fixed them. She looked up briefly. You like to fix things, he smiled. It's better than breaking them. There was silence between them for a long time. Then she asked quietly, do humans always keep promises? Not always, he said, thinking for a moment. But the good ones try. She turned her gaze to the sky. My father said humans had hearts that never gave up, even when logic said they should. Elias didn't answer. The sound of the fountain filled the quiet. After a while, she stood up and walked past him, her silver skin reflecting the garden lights like dim stars. But as she passed, she stopped for a second and said in a low voice, "Thank you for fixing the lights." It was the first time she had thanked anyone in years. Later that night, Elias found one of the palace guards waiting at his door. The alien's face was unreadable. "The council summons you," he said coldly. Elias followed without question. In the council chamber, dozens of alien nobles sat around the glowing circle table. Their leader, Lord Siral, smirked as Elias entered. "You are making yourself too comfortable, human," Siral said. "Repairing palace property, walking freely in royal gardens. Do you think you are above protocol?" "I was only fixing what was broken," Elias replied calmly. "Your palace has enough cracks to swallow half your pride." The room went silent. Some counselors looked shocked, others amused. Cyril's eyes burned. "Watch your tongue. You may think the kings will protect you, but that protection will fade. You were given a burden, not a crown." Elias met his gaze. "A burden can still be carried with honor." That answer spread through the chamber like fire. He was dismissed, but the guards who escorted him back whispered to each other. The human had spirit. Maybe that was why the king chose him. Over the next few weeks, things began to change quietly. Luria started spending more time outside her room. She followed Elias on his repair rounds, asking about human machines, about engines, and about the wars he had fought. She listened more than she spoke, but her eyes softened each time he explained something with his hands covered in grease and wires. One morning, she asked if he missed Earth. He laughed softly. "I miss the smell of rain, and blue skies that didn't hum with engines." "What is rain?" she asked, curious. "Water falling from the clouds. It cleans the world," he said. "You should see it one day." "I would like that," she said quietly. Their friendship grew from small talks and quiet work. She started helping him, learning how to use tools, though her delicate hands were unused to such things. When she managed to repair a small energy panel, Elias clapped his hands once. "Good job." Her eyes widened at his approval, as if no one had ever said those words to her before. For a moment, her expression almost looked human, warm and shy. But peace never lasted long in the Dominion. One evening, as they ate together in the empty kitchen, an alarm echoed through the palace halls. Guards rushed past, shouting in alien tongues. Luria froze, her violet eyes glowing faintly. "It's the council chamber," she whispered. Something happened. Elias stood. "Stay here," he said quickly. She shook her head. "If it's about my father's will, I must be there." They arrived at the chamber to find chaos. A new document had surfaced, supposedly an amendment to the king's will. It claimed that Luria was unfit to inherit anything, and that all royal assets were to pass to the council in trust. The nobles were using it to strip her of everything. Lord Siral raised the document high. This was sealed before the king's death. "The human's claim and the girl's inheritance are void." Elias stepped forward. "You forged that?" Siral turned, sneering. "And what proof do you have, human?" "The council believes me." Elias pointed toward the projection of the document. "The seal code there, look at the timestamp. It's from after the king's final communication. He was already dead." "You've made a mistake." Gasps filled the hall. The projection shifted, confirming his words. Siral's face turned cold. "You dare accuse a council member?" Elias didn't back down. "I don't accuse. I show truth. That's what the king asked me to do." Luria watched him, her heart pounding. No one had ever defended her in front of the council. Elias stood steady, facing dozens of alien eyes without fear. For a moment, even Siral couldn't find words. Later, after the meeting broke apart in confusion, Luria found Elias alone in the corridor. "You shouldn't have done that," she said softly. "They will come after you." "I've had worse enemies," he said with a tired smile. "Besides, I told your father I'd keep you safe. That includes from liars." She looked at him for a long moment, then whispered, "You remind me of him. He was stubborn too." The next day, whispers spread across the palace. Servants began greeting the princess again. Timidly but sincerely, the human's defiance had changed something. For the first time in years, Lorea walked through the main halls without hearing laughter behind her. That evening she visited Elias in his small room. He was cleaning a mechanical part from one of the old defense drones. She asked, "Why do you still stay here? You could leave. No one would stop you." He set the tool down and looked at her. "Because if I leave, they win. And I don't like seeing bullies win." She lowered her eyes. "They say you see beauty where others see none." He chuckled softly. "Maybe they should try looking with their hearts." She didn't answer, but her lips curved slightly. For a second, the light hit her skin in a way that made the silver shimmer softer, almost like moonlight. Weeks later, the first snowstorm of Carthar's season began, a rare event even for that world. Luria walked into the courtyard barefoot, watching flakes of frozen light fall from the dome sky. Elias followed her, holding his jacket tightly. She reached out her hand, letting the snow melt against her mineral skin. "So this is what cold feels like," she murmured. He smiled. "It's the closest thing you'll find to Earth's rain." She turned to him, her eyes glowing faintly. "Then maybe I understand you better now." In that quiet moment, neither spoke again. Around them, the storm painted the courtyard in silver light. But outside the palace, trouble was growing. The border beacons sent warnings of movement near the Dominion's edge. A fleet, unknown, heavily armed, was approaching. The council, too busy with their power games, ignored it. Only Elias noticed the faint change in the palace data systems. He went to the princess and said, "You need to come with me to the vaults. There's something your father left behind, and I think it's time we see what it is." She hesitated. "What is it?" "I don't know," he said. "But the way your father wrote his will, he planned everything. I think he knew this was coming." Lorea followed him through the old tunnels beneath the palace. Dust floated in beams of fading light. They reached a sealed door with a sigil that glowed faintly at her touch. It opened with a deep hum, revealing a chamber filled with ancient technology, machines built before the Dominion's founding. Elias stepped forward slowly, realizing what he was seeing. "Your father hid something powerful down here." Lorea stared at the center of the room where a crystal core pulsed like a living heart. "This is the Royal Defense System," she whispered. It was only a legend. "Then it's time to make it real again," Elias said. Above them, alarms began to ring across the city. The unknown fleet had entered orbit. As the council argued and panicked, two figures, one human, one alien, stood in the quiet vault where the old king's last secret waited. The galaxy had laughed when the will was read, but the real story was only beginning. The deep vault under the palace hummed with forgotten power. Dust swirled in the stale air as Elias and Princess Lurea stepped closer to the glowing crystal heart in the center. Its surface pulsed softly like a heartbeat, casting ripples of blue light across the metal walls. Strange symbols floated around it, ancient Karth letters mixed with unknown patterns that even Lurea couldn't read. Her voice was quiet. "My father once told me the royal bloodline was connected to the planet itself. I thought he was speaking in riddles." Elias touched one of the consoles. "He wasn't. This place is alive. It's like the heart of your world." She looked at him, her violet eyes reflecting the crystal's glow. "Only a true heir can command it." "That means me," he nodded slowly. "Then we'll have to trust that your father built this for a reason." The sensors on the upper levels showed a fleet entering orbit. "Whoever they are, they're not friendly." Lorea walked to the control platform. The moment her hand touched the crystal, light flared around her like a storm. Symbols rushed up her arm, glowing through her silver skin. The air vibrated with a deep sound, like the pulse of a living creature awakening after centuries of sleep. Elias shielded his eyes.
"What's happening?"
Her voice trembled. "It's recognizing me, but it's asking for something more." "A second command source," he frowned. "A second? What does that mean?" She turned toward him, the light flickering on her face. "It's designed for two. One of Karth blood, one of a different kind. Balance of thought and emotion, reason and courage." Elias stepped closer. "Then your father built it for us. He must have known he'd choose a human." She nodded slowly. "He trusted you before I ever met you." Outside, the sky of Carthar darkened. From the council towers, alien nobles watched in fear as the enemy fleet appeared. Black ships with no markings, only faint red lights glowing along their hulls. Energy blasts lit the upper atmosphere as small defense satellites tried to resist but were torn apart in seconds. The council panicked. Messages flashed across the chambers. Some nobles fled in their private transports. Others demanded the palace surrender to avoid destruction. In the vault, Elias placed his hand on the crystal beside hers. The system reacted instantly. Light spread across the floor in radiant circles. Two voices echoed in harmony, the voice of Lurea and another deeper tone merging into one command line. The machine spoke back in an ancient tone. Karth Defense Grid, a primary activation. Air confirmed. Secondary authorization, accepted. Energy surged upward through the walls, reaching the surface like veins of fire. Across the city, massive towers began to glow, sending blue beams into the sky that joined into a protective dome. The fleet's first volley of plasma strikes hit the dome and stopped. The energy rippled but held firm. The shield covered the entire planet. Lurea gasped and staggered. Elias caught her before she fell. "You're burning up," she shook her head weakly. "The link drains energy from the body. It needs both of us to sustain it," he gritted his teeth. "Then we'll keep it alive together." The vault trembled again as the shield adapted to the attack. Lurea struggled to stand, her mineral skin glowing brighter than before. "They won't stop. If they keep firing, the shield will collapse unless the core completes the activation sequence." Elias looked around. "How do we finish it?" She placed her palm against the crystal once more. "We have to bond our signals completely. If we fail, it could destroy us." He gave a tired smile. "We've faced worse odds." Their hands touched the crystal at the same time. The world exploded in light. Far above, the attacking fleet faltered. Their sensors went blind as the shield began to radiate intense waves of energy. Then a massive beam fired from the planet's surface, slicing through the dark ships like a blade of light. One by one, the enemy vessels fell apart, turning into glowing fragments that burned up in the atmosphere. The Galactic Council, watching from their towers, fell silent. The same ugly daughter they had mocked had just saved their world. When the battle ended, the vault dimmed again. Lurea collapsed against Elias's shoulder, her breathing shallow. Her silver skin had cracked along her neck and arms, revealing faint lines of soft blue light beneath. Elias carried her out of the chamber and up through the old tunnels, ignoring the alarm still echoing through the halls. At the surface, the palace was in chaos. Guards ran everywhere, council members argued, and civilians cried out in fear and confusion. Elias pushed through until he reached her private quarters. He laid her gently on the bed. "Stay with me," he said softly. Her eyes fluttered open. "It's peaceful now." "You did it," he said. "You saved them." She shook her head weakly. "We did. It only worked because you were there. The system needed balance." Before he could answer, the door burst open. Lord Siral stormed in with a group of guards. His face twisted in rage. "What have you done? You activated ancient weapons without council approval." Elias stood between them and the princess. "We defended your planet. You should be thanking her," Siral sneered. "That creature? You endangered us all. The energy pulse destroyed half our satellites. She saved billions," Elias said sharply. The guards hesitated. Even they had seen the sky burning with enemy ships. Cyril pointed a trembling finger at Lurea. "You will answer for this, both of you." But before he could continue, the main palace screen came alive. The surviving council leaders appeared in holographic form. Their faces were pale with shock. "The fleet has retreated," one said. If the royal defense grid had not been activated, Karthar would be lost. The council recognizes the actions of Princess Lurea Vurok and her human guardian as heroic. Siral froze. The guard stepped back. Elias felt relief for the first time. Lura opened her eyes slightly, looking at him. "They believe now," she whispered. Later that night, the palace grew quiet again. Most of the nobles had retreated to their chambers, ashamed of their mockery. Elia sat beside Lurea's bed, half asleep. The machines monitoring her life signs hummed softly. Her cracked skin was slowly healing, glowing gently under the light. When she woke, she looked at him with a tired smile. "You didn't leave," he chuckled. "Someone has to make sure the galaxy doesn't try to take you again." "You're different from them," she said. "You see beyond faces," he shook his head. "I just see people for what they do, not how they look." She stared at the ceiling. "When my father named you in his will, I was angry. I thought it was punishment. But maybe he wanted me to see what honor looks like. Elias didn't know what to say. The silence between them was soft, not empty. Outside, the dawn rose over the silver towers of Carthar. News broadcast across the galaxy spread the story. A human soldier and the king's outcast daughter had saved an entire world. The same council that had mocked now scrambled to praise. Some called it destiny. Others called it the beginning of a new era. Elias ignored the attention. He cared only that she was recovering. Each day she grew stronger. The cracks in her skin faded to thin silver lines, almost like marks of light. When she could finally stand again, she joined him on the balcony overlooking the capital. Below them, people were cheering. Ships flew by carrying banners of peace between humans and Carth. Lorea looked at the sky and whispered, "They don't laugh anymore." Elias smiled faintly. "No, they finally saw who you are," she turned to him. "And who are you, Captain Rain?" "Just a man who keeps his promises," he said. She laughed softly, a sound he had never heard from her before. It was warm and alive. "My father was right about humans," she said. "You have hearts that don't give up." As they stood there, the wind carried the faint sound of the people below chanting her name. It was not mockery this time. It was respect. Elias looked out over the city, feeling something in his chest ease at last. He had been through wars, seen planets burn, but this felt like peace. Lorea looked at him, her violet eyes glowing gently in the morning light. "You've changed everything," she said quietly. He shook his head. "No, you did. I just stood beside you." And for the first time since her father's death, the princess smiled without sadness. The days after the battle were filled with silence and rebuilding. The sky above Carthar was calm now, the twin suns shining over a planet that had almost fallen. The Galactic Council met again in the Great Hall, this time without the laughter that had once echoed through it. Every noble who had mocked the princess now stood still, heads bowed. The chamber lights dimmed as Princess Lorea entered. She walked slowly, her silver skin healed but marked with faint blue lines that glowed gently like symbols of strength. Behind her walked Captain Elias Rain, his human uniform plain among the richly dressed aliens. Yet when he stepped forward, even the guards who once sneered now stood aside with respect. Together they faced the council, and the hall that once roared with mockery now held its breath. The council leader spoke first, his voice uneasy. "Princess Lorea of House Vurok, the council acknowledges your act of heroism. The planet stands because of you." Lorea's tone was calm. "The planet stands because of both of us. My father left me under human protection for a reason. Now I understand it." Elias stood beside her silently. He had no love for speeches or politics. He only wanted to make sure no one would ever hurt her again. But he could feel the weight of the moment, the shift in the galaxy itself. Lord Saral, the same man who had tried to forge the will, stepped forward reluctantly. His pride was gone, replaced with fear. "Your Highness," he said, trying to sound humble, "the council wishes to restore your royal rights," and Lorea lifted her hand, stopping him. "You will restore the people's rights first," she said firmly. "My father's will was not just for me. It was for every world that the council used and abandoned. We will rebuild not for pride, but for peace." Her voice carried through the hall like a calm storm. No one dared argue. Even Saral bowed his head. When the session ended, the news spread through the entire Dominion. For the first time, the people had a leader who spoke for them, not for the council's greed. The princess, who had been called ugly, became the symbol of strength and truth. That evening, Elias stood on the palace balcony, watching the city glow below. The streets were full of lights and music. People were celebrating the victory, not with parades or guns, but with songs. He could see children waving small flags, half human, half Carth symbols drawn together. He smiled faintly, remembering all the battles he had fought and lost and how strange it felt to win without firing a shot. He heard soft footsteps behind him. Luria joined him on the balcony, wearing a simple cloak instead of royal robes. "You should be down there," she said quietly. "They're singing your name too." Elias shook his head. "They're celebrating you, not me." "I just followed orders." She looked at him for a long time. "You never followed orders. You followed what was right." He gave a small laugh. "I never liked politics. I'm just glad it's over." "It's not over," she said softly. "It's beginning. My father dreamed of peace between our kinds. Now we can finally build it." He nodded, watching the lights flicker below. Then build it strong, because peace needs walls higher than war. Lurea turned her gaze to the horizon. Will you stay to help me build it? He didn't answer right away. He thought of Earth, of the colonies still struggling, of the quiet places he once called home. I never planned to stay this long, he said finally. But maybe this place needs a mechanic more than another soldier. She smiled, her violet eyes softening. Then stay as both. In the following weeks, Lurea began her work as queen. The palace that had once been a symbol of fear became open to all. She replaced the throne room's golden walls with clear glass so the sunlight could touch the council floor. She created schools where both human and Karth children studied side by side. She sent ambassadors to Earth, inviting them to share technology and culture. Elias became her closest advisor. He helped design the first fleet meant not for war but for exploration. The people called it the King's Promise. Every ship carried the joint crest of both races. The engineers worked under Elias's direction, while Lurea herself often visited the docks, speaking with workers and helping where she could. She was no longer the silent princess hidden behind palace walls. She was a queen whose people followed her with love. One day, as they inspected a new ship, an old worker bowed deeply before her. My queen, he said, your father would be proud. Lurea smiled kindly. He would be prouder of you. You're the ones who built this. Elias watched her from a distance, feeling something warm in his chest. She no longer looked fragile or uncertain. The woman who once hid from the world now stood at its heart, stronger than any warrior he had ever known. But not everyone welcomed the change. Far beyond Karthar, in the outer systems, remnants of the enemy fleet had survived. Their commanders plotted revenge, furious that their invasion had failed. Rumors of another attack reached the palace. When Lurea heard the news, she summoned Elias immediately. They're coming again, she said. We can't wait this time, Elias nodded. Then we'll be ready. The defense grid is still working, but we should upgrade the outer colonies too. If we want peace to last, we must protect it. Together they began to plan again, not for conquest but for security. The galaxy that once mocked Earth now looked to humans for leadership. Engineers from a dozen worlds worked side by side under Lurea's command. The fear that once divided them slowly faded, replaced by unity. On the day the first joint fleet launched, the entire planet watched. The ships rose from the docks like glowing birds, their hulls reflecting the suns. Elias stood beside Lurea as the lead ship disappeared into the stars. She turned to him. You gave me courage when I had none. I owe you everything. He shook his head. You don't owe me anything. You gave the galaxy hope. That's worth more than any reward. Her voice softened. Still, I will give you something. She reached into her cloak and handed him a small medal shaped like a tear of crystal. This belonged to my father. He said it was for the bravest heart he ever knew. Elias stared at it quietly, emotion rising in his throat. He was a wise man. He saw what others couldn't, she said gently. That strength is not in power, but in kindness. He looked out toward the stars again. Then I'll carry his words with me. Years passed. Under Queen Lurea's rule, the Dominion changed more than anyone had imagined. War fleets became trade fleets. The council was reformed, its members chosen by merit, not blood. Humans were welcomed as citizens, not outsiders. And whenever visitors came from across the galaxy, they spoke of the queen with silver skin and violet eyes who rebuilt her world with the help of one human soldier. Elias stayed by her side through it all. He refused every title she offered, choosing instead to work quietly in the background. When asked why he never sought power, he always gave the same answer. Because I already saw what real power looks like. It wasn't until the day of the 10th peace anniversary that he realized how far they had come. The great plaza of Karthar was filled with thousands of people, human and alien, young and old, standing together under a single flag. The queen addressed them from the balcony, her voice strong and clear. 10 years ago, she said, the galaxy laughed at a human and a daughter they called ugly. But what they called weakness became our strength. Because one man believed when no one else did, our world survived. And today our hearts beat as one. The crowd erupted in cheers. Elias stood behind her, smiling quietly. He never liked speeches, but he felt pride swell in his chest. When the celebration ended, Lurea found him standing alone in the courtyard. You never change, she said softly. Maybe that's a good thing. he replied. She looked at him with gentle eyes. Will you ever return to Earth? He thought for a long moment. Maybe one day, but for now this is home. She smiled, and for the first time since the day they met, there was no sadness or distance in her eyes. Then home is safer with you here. As the sun set over the towers of Carthar, their light painted the sky in gold and violet. The city below glowed with peace. Elias turned toward the horizon. Your father's promise is kept, he said quietly. Lorea looked at him. No, Captain. It's just beginning. And as the stars appeared one by one, the galaxy that once mocked now whispered their names with reverence. The soldier and the stone-skinned queen, the two who had proven that hearts, not crowns, decide the worth of a world.